Hello, role-playing people. In this episode I come to you with a confession and a question. I have been playing tabletop RPGs for more than a decade now. Though I became interested in this hobby because of my love for video games, in recent years I've been getting all my narrative, storytelling and role-playing needs from pen and paper, so much so that I don't even play video games anymore, which is quite the shock. The very few that I still play are either oriented towards the mechanics and challenges, like survival games, or they are weird and ambiguous in their world building and plot, like, say, The Void, which is an amazing experience, by the way. So it really got me thinking, why don't I enjoy video games like I did? And the answer is narrative freedom. Video games as a medium cannot offer the same narrative freedom that pen and paper games offer. Why do I believe that? Well, while I am not a game designer, I can't help but notice video games are effectively played between player and developer, not between character and world. Developer invites the players to explore a world that has already been created, without their input, without any direct collaboration. Player interacts with said world through a character. Not their character, but a character, an avatar. Certainly, some customization options exist, there are cosmetic modifications that can be made, there are interesting and very diverse skill trees to choose from, equipment to be found, and so on. But these elements don't really impact the story. They impact the mechanics, they impact the way the player interacts with the world through their avatar. Narration-wise, even the most complex dialogue trees and character backstory options don't offer nearly enough freedom. And how could it? It can't, because the story has already been written. It was implemented without the player. It was programmed to work in a certain way, and all the game can do is have minor reactions to player input and character build. Nothing too spontaneous, of course. The game effectively cannot adapt to the player's desires and choices. As such, choice is an illusion, even if the conclusion of the game offers, 3 or more different endings. Why do I say illusion? Because exploring those endings is always based on the challenge of beating the game. You, the player, have no choice but to win, whether it leads to a tragic conclusion or an epic victory. You have no choice but to crush all challenges the developer presents you with and win. The story is always second place and has pretty much the same conclusion even in the most beautifully written games, because the internal challenge of beating the game is the central element. And this becomes immediately visible if we consider the idea of saves, reloads, or bonfire respawns. For example, Dark Souls, though it beautifully intertwines character death with narration, right? It still expects you to get good and beat the challenge. You don't do that, you don't get to see the conclusion of the story. Easy. Now, I'm not saying video games are bad, by the way. I'm saying video games as a medium, through their very nature, will always be more challenge mechanics and build-oriented first and foremost, and will place narration and story in second place. What's interesting, actually, is that at first, that's how I ran my tabletop games as well. I didn't really ask anyone to contribute to the narration and story by creating complex characters who can lead the action, because I didn't run sandbox game. I didn't bounce off the player's input. Oh no, at first it was this encounter of the week style of linear game in which I awkwardly tried to balance encounters and desperately tried to keep things fresh and keep the players invested. I was actually bummed out when my players treated it like a video game and, broke my story, when in fact I was the one who treated it like a video game and not like a collective storytelling experience. And again, I feel the need to explain and say there is nothing wrong with playing a tabletop RPG like it's a video game. Going on adventures, getting loot, better items, more gold, leveling up, anything goes as long as it's fun for everyone. But pen and paper RPGs as a medium allow for a wide array of experiences. It can be about So much more than bringing your character to the game, beating a few challenges, leveling up, and walking away a winner. Actually, I honestly believe that tabletop RPGs can finally place narration and storytelling above the mechanics and the winning. How so? Right off the bat, the player's input can genuinely make a difference in the themes, moods, and overall feel of the game, which is a huge thing. And sometimes they can make a difference in the mechanics. Certainly, Dark Souls will always be Dark Souls. There is no internal character build I can make that will make Dark Souls less. Nor can I negotiate with the game to go easy on me when I inevitably die and go back to the bonfire. But in, say, a vampire game, considering the elements that make up the setting and metaplot are a spectrum, I can play into certain narrative elements more than others, and I can just scrap the ones I don't like. I can tone down the darkness of the setting, I can bring out more magic, I can always ignore the metaplot, and, at players' requests, I can even change the rules if I'm willing to compromise and they really, really want a different set of rules, or maybe like a small variation. The activity itself is performative. It comes to life and the story is being written as we're going along, as we're playing the game. As such, the response to player agency isn't always the same, and isn't the same as in a video game, since there is so much less scripting happening and way more improv. Not only is the world brought to life by a living entity, the storyteller or GM, but the protagonists themselves are the result of player sensibility and creativity. Most video games have you playing some kind of hero who defeats the big bad and restores order, the classic story, hero's journey, whatever you call it. In tabletops, depending on what stories everyone brings to the table and whether the GM is okay with running with them or not, you can enjoy different character archetypes, not just the heroes. You can play a normal person in an exceptional circumstance. You can play a villain. You can play the monster. And pretty much whatever archetype is okay with everyone and strikes your fancy. As such, you get to explore not only the world, other characters and external conflicts, but internal conflicts. Sins and virtues, different behaviors, different personality types, and maybe reach different conclusions. If the GM is accommodating enough, you can even ask them to offer you a certain experience. Maybe I want to enjoy a tragic character death at the end of this chronicle, something I haven't had till now. Yeah, I want my protagonist to die tragically in the heat of battle, but my expectation doesn't need to ruin the game for everyone else and drastically change the plot. Oh no, it simply needs to be included. Because it's not about winning the challenge, it's about telling a good story. You see, finally, in tabletop RPGs, I found a place where the story comes first, and I don't need my character to win in order for me to win as a player. If everyone tells an awesome, immersive story, a collective story, everyone wins, regardless of the narrative conclusion, whether the hero lives or dies, whether the monster sinks further into their madness or finds redemption. This is so liberating, knowing that there is no wrong, underpowered build, there is no pressure to succeed other than the one you feel in character, and there is no wrong story, as long as it's immersive and keeps everyone invested. Knowing that the narration is shaped by my protagonist, a character of my own design, completely of my own creation, and I get to occasionally dip into scenes that weren't really planned by my GM, maybe a scene of seduction and romance, maybe a feeding gone wrong that leaves a mortal lifeless in my protagonist's frightened arms. That is so empowering to me as the player, knowing that even my character's failure can lead to a beautiful story, and we, the players, always win. Just by participating and enjoying the ride, we win. This is why I always try to bounce off my players' characters and focus so much on their development and their stories. This is why I always invite my players to read the setting books and really spend time with their protagonists. Because if they just make characters like they are 2D cardboard cutouts that they pick out from off a rack like an armory, they will treat the characters like they are avatars of themselves, not complex living entities. Instead of telling a good story, they will be tempted to consider it more of a board game, to simply best challenges and win. And there's nothing wrong with that. But when that happens, the story falls into second place once again. In conclusion, I am so happy that this hobby and this medium, pen and paper RPGs, can allow genuine narrative freedom and can allow the player genuine choice in what is, to me, a beautiful collaborative storytelling experience. And this ends my confession, which is that I enjoy tabletop so much I feel like playing video games for the purpose of enjoying the story is effectively a step down. It's not interactive enough. Opting instead to play video games that don't really have a story, only mechanics, like survival games. Now, after having told you how I feel about them, here's my question. What are tabletop RPGs to you? Thank you very much for listening. Take care, have fun, and don't forget to play.